Welcome to another Back of the Net recording. This is to help you with changing the subject of a formula or rearranging a formula. It's not always clear in the exam whether they're going to use the word change to change the subject of a formula or rearrange a formula. They swap between both of those ways of writing the question. Here I've said make P the subject of each of these formulas. It may say rearrange the formula to make P the subject. But either way you should be able to identify what it's about. So, looking at the first question, make P the subject of each of these formulas. That means by the end of our work we want to get to a point where we can say P equals dum-de-dum-de-dum, whatever it's going to be. Or it might be that we get something equals P. Whatever it is, we're going to be able to isolate that equals P bit by itself and have all our other workings here. There are different ways of doing this. The way that I find most useful to students is to use a simple flow diagram. I like using flow diagrams because you can use it in so many topics. So I want P to be the subject, so I start looking at P and I write down P. The first thing that happens to P is it's times by 3. We know that's the first thing that happens because, as always, we are following the rules of BIDMAS. I'm not going to write down what they are, just remind you: brackets, indices, division, multiply, addition, subtraction. So the thing that happens first here is either a timesing, because 3p of course means 3 times p, and then a plus s. Well, the multiplication comes before the addition. So that's the thing that happens first. So it's p, and the first thing I do is times that by 3. I'll draw this little arrow on the box to show that I'm working this way at the moment. I then have to add on s plus s, and that gives me the answer R. Now I want to undo that now, so that I end up, by the time I end with, gives me P. That would be the equals P bit I was looking for up here. So starting with R, the opposite of adding s, the proper word of course is the inverse, is going to be to subtract s. And then after I've subtracted the s, I'm going to need to do the inverse or opposite of times 3, which is going to be divide by 3, and that will give me P. Well, I've done all the hard work already. Now all I've got to do is just write down, just put some on there, write down what I've done. So I had R, started with it there, I take away the s, and then I divide by the 3. It's important though that everything I've done so far is divided by 3, so it must be all the way along there, that line, divide by 3, and that gives me equals, gives me P. Question done. Really nice 3 marks there. Answer is R minus S divided by 3 will give me P. Certainly when I'm teaching this, I then show students how to substitute different values in to check I got it right or wrong, and your teacher may have done that too. I'm not going to do that today because I just want it straightforward, simple for you to follow. Okay, let's do question 2 over here. Now I've made this one look a bit more complicated. I've got more variables, more letters if you like, involved in it, and I've got a division and some timesing, a bit more going on really. Don't be frightened, just start with the same question again. Make P the subject. So I want to start with my P, so I can end up with P equals at the end, or something equals P. Let's just do it nice and calmly. P, let's start there. The first thing I've got going on is some subtraction and some times and a bit of division. The most powerful thing, the thing that comes first in BIDMAS, in this case is a multiplication. So let's go for it. P, first thing, times it by R. Next thing, take away the T. Next thing, divide all of that by S. And that will give me V. Well, I've done my journey going out, just put a few arrows on to remind me where I'm going. Gave me V, and now I just work backwards. V. Now some people I see, they like to draw out this first of all and just fill it in as they go. Last time I did it, I drew as I went, but some people like that because it just gives them, once they've got it set out, gives them more chance to think about what they're doing. V, well the opposite of divide by 3 is to times by 3. The opposite or inverse of subtracting t is to add t. And the opposite of times by r is to divide by r. And that will give us p. We've done all the hard work. Now all we've got to do is write it out. So v times by 3. Well, I'm just going to write that as 3v to keep it simple. 3v is 3v's, 3 times by v. Then I've got to add my t. Done that a bit. Then divide by r, but it's everything so far divided by r, so it's divide by r. And that, of course, gives me p. There we go. Answer done. I said that was worth 3 marks. Maybe I was being generous. That might be worth 2. This one might be worth 3. It's always a bit difficult to see, but they're around about the 2 or 3 marks in a question. Okay, I've written down 2 here for you to do. You can have a go at those, and then do the press pause thing. So, and I'll go through them when you come back. So you press pause now and have a little go. Okay. Hopefully you've had a go at that and you come back and try to do it yourselves, and I'm going to just show you how I would have done it. Again, it's making p the subject, so there's my p. In this case it's p. It's being times by v squared. That whole thing can be treated as 1. The v squared is times by v squared. I'll have to draw a big box around it, but there you go. And then I add my b. Add b. So that's my 2 steps there, and it gave me c. Okay, I'm just going to stop. You press pause for a second if you want to, so you can, now you've sorted out the v squared thing, you may want to do that yourself now. Okay, I'll carry on. So, working backwards, see, the opposite of add the b is to subtract the b. And then the opposite of timesing by v squared is to divide by v squared. And that will chuck out the p. Write down what I did. So I'm just going to put some arrows on here. So it was c. Take the b, divide by the v squared, gave me p. Job done. I always like to draw a box around it because it makes it really clear that's what my answer is. Hopefully you had a go at this one as well. This was a little bit more straightforward perhaps because there was nothing new. I threw that v squared in there just to check if it did come up in an exam we'd know what to do about it. But it was new. This is nothing new than was up here. So hopefully this one was more straightforward for you. Again, I start with my p. That was make p the subject, so there it is. P. First thing was times by an a. The next thing was to add the b. And then it was divide by the c. And that gave me t. So in doing that, I'm going to start with my t. And again, I'm going to do it the way the other people like it, which is to draw your boxes out ready to fill in. And that will give me p at the end. Let's put an arrow on there so I know my direction. And off we go. Alright then. T, opposite or inverse of divide by c, is to times by c. The inverse of add b is to subtract b. The inverse of multiply by a is to divide by a. Let's write out what we did. T times by c. Now a quick way to that is to write ct. C times by t is ct. Subtract the b. Divide all of that by the a. And that will of course equal p. I'm very happy with that. The only thing I'm not happy about is that c there looks a little bit more like an e, but it's a bit hard to adjust sometimes. That's made it worse. There we go. Ct minus b all divided by a. Okay, that's some simple stuff, or may not be simple for you, but that's generally what comes up. I just want to move on to the next board to show you 2 other things that sometimes get thrown in that may just cause you a bit of heartache. The first one is something called take away from. So I'm just going to look at this one first of all, and then let you have a go at one yourself, and then I'll do the same again for question 3, and you can have a go at question 4. If this is going too far for you, stop now, don't worry about it. The chance of this coming up is quite small, but if it does come up, it's not too hard to sort out. If you find after this slide it's confused you, go back and watch the slide and then don't bother watching this second one again. Here goes then. So this time we're looking for a. I've changed to make a the subject of the formula. So there's my a. So it's A, it's being times by R, that's my first stage, times the R. The problem now is that is being itself is taken away from V squared, which isn't RA, it's not RA minus V squared, it's V squared minus RA, which is different, because the order you do subtraction in matters. 5 take 3 is 2, 3 take 5 is minus 2, so there is a difference to the order you do it in. So the problem here is, we've got this A, we've times it by our R, and we've got to take that away from V squared. Now the way we do that in maths is to write take away from take away from V squared. Just write it like that, don't panic. And that of course gave us Q. I'm now going to do the undoing of that Q, and I'm just going to draw the boxes in first so that it's clear for you without me writing too much too soon. This is something that a lot of people aren't sure about. The inverse thing we've been doing has been easy. We did it on the previous slide. Here we're going to have no problem. It's the inverse of multiply by R is to divide by R. We can fill that in now. The problem is, what is the inverse of take away from V squared? Well, take away from is a special function. It's called a self-inverse. It basically means that the opposite of take away from is indeed take away from. So we just write that there. Take away from. Now we write down what we've got. We start with Q. We take it away from V squared. So it's not Q minus V squared, because that's subtract V squared. We want to take it off of V squared, or take it away from. So I'm just going to delete that last thing I did there and write it properly. So that Q has got to be taken away itself from V squared. So it's V squared minus Q. And then we've got to divide by R. Divide by R. And that equals A. Done. So the take away from function is a self-inverse. It means that if you've written take away from here, you just write it down there. Okay, here's another question for you. I'm going to give you a hint that it's a take away from, so you can have a go at it yourself. Press pause now and have a go. Okay, welcome back. I'm now going to show you this one. Again, it was make A the subject, so I start with my A. This time, I multiply by Q. It was then that amount taken away from N, so I should have written taf N. And that is going to give me P in this case. So P. Opposite of take away from, self-inverse. Take away from N. Opposite of multiply by Q is to divide by Q, and that will give me A. So let's write this down then. It's P taken away from N. So take away from N, that means I needed the N, take away the P. So N minus the P, and then divide all of that by Q, and it will equal A. Strangely I've done that. Let's write that a better A if I can. There. There's your answer. Should be fairly straightforward. Okay, on to this one here next. In this case, I've not written it well. I should have written here make X a subject. Obviously you could make A the subject because it wasn't in the question. Right, let's do this one. So we start with X. Now straight away we got a problem because it's being divided. Well, it's not being divided by R. R's being divided by the X. So in this case, we say that X is divided into R. How many X's are there in R? Just like if you were to do, let's think of a number, 14 divided by 2, you could say that's 14 divided by 2, or how many 2's are there in 14? Answer both ways is 7. So this is called divide into. So how many X's are there in R, or X divided into R? And guess what? We just use a simple din, divide into R, then we add the T, this is this bit here now, add the T, and it gives us N. I'm just going to draw my arrows around there to make sure I'm clear of my direction. gives me n. Now let's work backwards. N. Straightforward here. The opposite of add t is to subtract t. Everyone can do that. And then we've got the interesting bit, which is the din. Divide into. Well, yet again, when we use these three-letter acronyms, DIN, TAF, divide into is indeed a self-inverse. So it's just din r. And that will throw out x. Let's write that down then. N subtract t divided into r. So it's how many of those are there in r. Just like that. I'm going to just cross through that there a minute to draw it over here where there's a little bit more room so you can see clearly exactly how I wrote it. And that of course gave us x. And the key point there is it was x divided into r. So I wrote din r, and when I came back through it, the inverse of divide into r, or din r, is divide into r. It's a self-inverse, just like TAF was. Therefore I was able to write this. Okay, question 4 for you. If you'd like to press pause and have a go. Welcome back. Here we go then. Make an x a subject. Hope you realise that. As there wasn't an a, I'd written make x a subject over here. So I start with my x. Now, how many x's are there in m squared? So it's a din divide into x squared. That's my first step. The next one is to subtract n. Nice straightforward, subtract n, and it throws out p, gives us p. So working backwards, p. Opposite is to add n. And then, of course, din is self-inverse, so divide into x squared, it's going to be din x squared. And that will throw out, sorry, I've done that wrong. That there wasn't x squared, it was m squared, so that there should be m squared. I'll just take you through it again. Start with x. First thing you do is divide it into m squared, so it should be din m squared. Then take away the n. Gave me p. P, opposite or inverse of take the n is to add the n. The inverse of din m squared is din m squared, and that gives out x. I can now write that down. P plus the n, and that's divided into m squared equals x. Job done. Okay, I hope that's been useful to you. If you found this second page here a bit tricky, and this is the self-inverse page, you're welcome to go back and look at page 1, all the work we did on here. And that should be more straightforward. Have a second go through of that and stop at the end of that page. Most of you though should be capable of understanding what to do for this second page here, where it's a self-inverse idea. Remember, take away from, divide into, divide into. The only time we use those letters, we use letters in these boxes, it's in those cases, and when you use a letter, the inverse of it is exactly what you wrote above the top. So that's a good way to remember it. I do hope that's been useful to you. There is another stage of rearranging formula where you get the subject twice, but that's an A/A star question, and that will be on the A and A star video for you watching before the exam. Okay, do come back and watch another video. I do hope that one has helped you a little bit with changing the subject or rearranging a formula.